Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Lessons Learned by the Practice Growth Masters. This is Steve Riley. I have the pleasure today of sharing with you some brilliant insights from attorney Neel Shah. And before we start, I'd like to tell you just a few minutes about Atticus. So the company Atticus was founded about in 1989, and we've celebrated, I guess, our 26th year now. And it's really founded to help solo and small firm lawyers who are out in the marketplace trying to make a bigger difference for their clients and their families. And really what we're about is developing strategies and techniques to help you as a lawyer really reduce stress, get better control of your life, and at the end of the day, make a greater contribution to your clients in your community. And we really have, hopefully have you on this webinar. So you're looking at maybe perhaps looking at us as a way of helping you take your practice to the next level, helping you take your practice and getting it under maybe better control, maybe making a higher income, you know, whatever it is that you're up to. And really there's two ways to ask questions on today's call. If you have a question, you can use the chat function on the bottom of your GoToWebinar dashboard, or you can click the hand icon to recognize that you have a question, you want to be unmuted. And myself or Mike Wells, who's also on this call, but I think was muted or dropped off at the very beginning of the call, will either unmute you or respond to the questions that you have. We also have several of our team on the call with us. So if there's something I can't help you with or I'm not sure what to do with, I can reach out to Daniel Struna, Jeff Hines, Denise Gamez, or Larry, all who are on the call with us to really be here to support you in this call. My name, for those of you that have attended these webinars in the past, my name is Steve Riley. I'm one of the shareholders at Atticus, and I've really behind a lot of the curriculum development, around a lot of the leadership development of our attorneys. Right now we have the pleasure of working with over 500 law firms across the country. And today we're really focused on what we call the lessons learned. And where we get the lessons learned webinar series from, we like to do one a month. And we try and select from our client base attorneys that have really done some extraordinary things. And today we're going to interview attorney Neel Shah. I'll introduce him more formally in a second. We will have a brief conversation at one point about how the programs work for somebody like Neel. And we'll also talk about our most important recommendation from today's call. So let me go ahead and just introduce Neel. So this, those of you that are following along via the webinar, you can see this wonderful picture of Neel. Neel is a fabulous lawyer. I had the pleasure of meeting him, I'm thinking 6 years ago. He'll probably correct me on the exact date. But 6 years ago, or 7 years ago maybe now, in one of our group programs. And I'll let him tell his story, but his focus is really on working with family members, business owners, and really looking at how to help them do asset protection, business planning, general estate planning. You know, he's done a tremendous amount of work in the business owner market, helping entrepreneurs from everything from transactions to tax planning. But the core of his practice is really strategic thinking for people who want to leave a legacy and make a difference for their families. And he's really done some really interesting things from a marketing perspective, really interesting things from shifting his practice, narrowing his niche. And his website right here, of course, is www.lawesq.net. And I'll put up his website in a second as I give him a further introduction. So if you want to hit his website and check out some of the really cool things that he's doing, you can totally do that as well. So Neel, welcome to the call. It's first and foremost, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. My understanding is that you are pulled over on the side of the road, coming from one meeting to another meeting to join us via mobile hotspot. So we really appreciate you taking the work and the effort being here today. So welcome to the call.
Thanks for having me. And yes, I'm pulled over voluntarily. Somebody didn't pull me over, just to clarify for the record. Yeah. This time.
Yeah. Yeah, this time. Just to clarify. So this time. So tell me let's talk for a few minutes. So we had the pleasure of meeting you, and I think, is my timeline right? Was it 6 years ago, 7 years ago?
I want to say it was 7 years ago, right around, probably around this time of year, 2010.
Yeah, 2010. Mm-hmm. And you were in a group program at the time. So before we talk about you joining the group program, what was going on for you at that point in your practice and your life? What was your thinking like? What was what were you part of a firm, transitioning from a firm? What was going on at that point in time?
Yeah, I was kind of all over the place. I guess I have to go back a little further. Just to lay some foundation, I started my own practice in 2001, which was right out of my clerkship. So I had never really had a law firm job. Started my own law firm because I had some connections in the real estate and business world, and met up with a partner about a year after starting my firm, and then joined up forces with him, and we wound up building a firm of about 7 attorneys, and ultimately, a few years later, had the opportunity to merge with another firm in Atlanta. Got to a point where we had a firm of 15 attorneys, and I got to have the title of founding partner on the entire mechanism. But shortly thereafter, went through I'm not going to say a messy partnership divorce, but let's just say that we decided to go our separate ways. And I'd say that was maybe about 7 or 8 months before we joined the coaching program where Steve was the coach. And I was at a point then where I was questioning everything. I wasn't really sure if law was for me. I wasn't sure if business ownership was for me. So really everything was on the table, walking away from law or getting a job as an attorney or as something else, or starting some other business. So I was really all over the place, and I wasn't really sure that law was going to help me get to where I wanted to be in life. And that's pretty much when our paths crossed.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of the common elements that I see when we start working with someone who's new to Atticus, new to our services. They're usually in a place where they're pretty miserable, like emotionally they're miserable. They would prefer to find something else other than practicing law. They're playing the lottery with far greater intensity than a normal human being. They're hoping to come up with the next great novel in some cases, so they're usually pretty miserable. So it sounds like you were kind of
Definitely.
there at that point in time, like emotionally,
Absolutely.
like not so sure if this is where you want to be.
Well, yeah, and you read all these like journals, or you read these magazines like Inc. magazine or Entrepreneur magazine, and you'd have all these fantastic concepts of what business ownership should be like, and for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how to reconcile business ownership with law firm ownership. It just felt more and more, as much as I wanted to be a business owner and a lawyer, it just felt like I owned a job the whole time, and it was getting really frustrating because I couldn't ever leverage it. I couldn't get to that next level.
Yeah, it's interesting. I typically think that most lawyers, it's not that they own a firm, they own a high stress, low paying job that they're praying to God somebody could fire them from. So when you started this, and this is really about your lessons and the things you learned, and I know it's a while ago, you're talking 6, 7 years, and you've really gone through a lot of changes. When you look back during the time period, could you tell me what you think the first significant change was that you made? And, obviously you committed to a coaching program and you're in a coaching program. That's definitely one change. But during the coaching program, looking back, what do you think so if you're talking to people on the call, what would you say the first thing was that really made a difference for you as far as the shift to where you're clearly happier in your practice?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of kumbaya-ish and really kind of flaky, but it really was a mindset shift. I think I had to first acknowledge that what I had right now wasn't working. And and that was really difficult because at least I had been told a story all through law school about this is what success looks like as an attorney, and this is what success looks like after you graduate from law school, and this is what success looks like when you're servicing a client and when you have employees, and a law firm should look a certain way. And once I was able to sort of shed that, and it took some time to shed that. I'm definitely an evidence-based person. Like, I need to see something in motion before I'll actually buy in. So it took a little bit of a leap of faith for me to say, okay, well, there's more than one way to run a law firm. There's more than one way to run a law business. And I just have to figure out the one that's going to work for me. Just because I'm not there doesn't mean I'm not going to get there. It just means I'm not there yet. So let's just step back and identify what that looks like for me. What is it going to look like for me to have a law business which serves my life, and not the other way around, not be a slave to the business.
That's good. That's good. So there's a couple of things I heard there. One is that you kind of had to let go of what the industry at large and what you learned in law school at large said is a traditional law practice, so to speak. You had to let that go and kind of reinvent a practice that worked for you. When you did that, what's the first thing that you recall, or what's the first thing that you'd recommend to other people that might be in a position where they want to be happier in the practice of law?
Again, I think it has to go back to knowing what you want out of your business, knowing what you want out of your career. There are quote unquote lifestyle businesses and lifestyle practices, and maybe you don't need to make $700,000 in a given year in order to meet your lifestyle. Maybe you need to have 300,000. Maybe it's 150,000. Maybe it's not even a monetary goal. Maybe you need to put in 20 hours. Maybe it's not a Monday through Friday thing, and you're happy putting in the weekends as long as you get Monday and Tuesday off to work on something else. For me, a lot of it had to do at the time about family, and this is where I would not have unearthed this, but a lot of my stress, a lot of my aggravation was rooted from things that had nothing to do with my law practice. It had a lot to do with just the way I was brought up and my relationship with money and the way that I thought that a typical household would work. So, when you and I, when I first got introduced to you when we started this whole coaching thing, my kids are 13 and soon to be 12 now. So now 10 years ago, they would have been, say, 3 and 2 years old. And I had a certain image of what a father and a provider should look like and how a business should function. And it was really frustrating to me because I didn't feel like I was holding up my end of the bargain. So I really had to get in touch with what I wanted out of this business, what I wanted out of my career. And I think once I got in touch with that, then I was able to take a more practical approach and say, okay, well, listen, if this is where I want to be from a life perspective, how does the business fit in with that? What does that mean I have to take home monetarily? Where does that mean I have to be home at a certain hour and have dinner? And does it mean that I have to bust open the laptop every night and work until I fall asleep? Or does it mean that I just have to be more purposeful about the kind of clients that I take in? I'd say that was probably one of the biggest shift, was just getting in tune with that.
That's great. That's really good. So a lot of lawyers are not running their own race. They're running the race that they're told they should run. And in your case, you took a step back and said, okay, really, what does it mean for me to be a good dad? And have a wonderful photo of you and your family with the kids hanging on your back and your wife, beautiful wife, Pinky, looking at you on the screen. You can't see it, no doubt, but you're...
Now I'm looking at it. I see it.
Oh, good. You can see it.
Yeah.
So...
yeah, and I'd say, this kind of summarizes it well, Steve. Sorry. This summarizes it well. We went through this great exercise. Can I talk about My Great Life for a quick second?
Sure, absolutely. It's a tool in one of the programs, by all means.
Yeah, that was probably one of the most impactful things that you had us do. And I won't go into all the details about it, but before you kind of dive in and say, okay, you know what, you need to do more marketing, or you need to hire the right people, or maybe you need to do team building exercises. And that's what, instinctively I would have gone through, because that's the kind of stuff that you read about in blogs and in business journals and that sort of thing. But I think it was really important for us to go through this exercise of My Great Life to identify, well, what does my great life look like? And it's such a bigger picture than just the business itself. Because once I've identified that my goal in my life is to be a hero for my clients, but a well-paid hero, and I want to be a fantastic dad, well, now I can backtrack into that and say, okay, look, there's going to be charitable work, and there's going to be altruism in my life, but there's also going to be capitalism in my life, and there's also going to be parenthood in my life, and I can find a way to make all that work together.
Yeah, that's great. So it's an important process that a lot of lawyers either drive right by or never take the time to do. And so for those of you that are listening, Migrate Life, the tool that we use in the group programs, where you do basically takes about 90 minutes to do the exercise, but you start to think about what are your compelling reasons, the things that would count as a lifetime legacy. And you do about it, we call it, the first tool, the 10-year planning tool. So it really allows you to reshift and shape what you're doing so you can design a practice that works for you, and not, really not be a slave to the practice, but have the practice really work for you. Now, there's two interesting things that I'd like you to talk about. You are a published author, and I've got this up on the screen. So this is a really cool thing that you've done. So talk about the book that you wrote, Planning for Business Owners. It's up on the screen. And talk about the book and how you use this book in your marketing.
Yeah, the book was, it was quite an accomplishment. And I think when maybe some of the people on the panel, the attendees are listening, they might be impressed by it. And that was really the impact I was going for. I wanted to have somebody impressed that Neel was able to write a book. But I don't know how many people have actually read the book, Steve. I really use it like a business card on steroids. And, this was one of those things where I embarked on this because I really wanted to become the subject matter expert. I think it's well written, personally. Obviously, I wouldn't have published it otherwise. And I think it's really helped to give the outside world notice that, hey, this is what Neel does. Neel works with business owners, and he's not the guy who read the books on it. He's the guy who wrote the book on it. So it's become, I would say, first and foremost, it is a marketing tool. But separate from marketing, it's also a sales tool, because when I have a prospect coming in who may be a business owner, and the goal for me is to be able to do their estate planning, their business planning, and in the past I also did some transactional work, although I don't do that anymore. But the idea is to have this presumption of competence before they even come in, and sort of set the foundation so that they're excited to come in. And we do some work in our coaching programs on DISC profiles and personality tests and stuff like that. I've gotten in tune with what my strategy is, or what my tendencies are, I should say. And I needed to find a strategy that worked for my personality style. And this works for me because I do want to be the subject matter expert. I do want to be considered the smartest guy in the room. And when people come in already thinking that, well, I feel like I've got an easier job trying to get them to work with me.
Yes, that's great. So this is a terrific, those of you that are looking for ways of growing your practice, you really did two things here. One, you didn't really talk too much about, but you actually narrowed your practice. At one point, my recollection is that you did like transactional real estate, you did buying, selling of businesses. You had a pretty broad-based practice at one point. And this was kind of a, how shall I say, a stake in the ground where you went ahead and narrowed the niche and started really marketing more and more towards the entrepreneurial business owner than everybody. Talk to us for a few minutes about that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when I was in that space, and again, it took me a while to get to this point. I know a lot of this sounds like therapy, but I guess in a way it sort of is. It's this insecurity that if I don't say yes to the next phone call that comes in for a business transactional deal, I'm not very confident that the next person is going to call for a estate plan or a business succession plan. But all in all, I mean, that was the work that I enjoyed. That's the work that I continue to enjoy, is the planning aspect of it. And if I don't have that security, that what I'm doing is clogging up my pipeline and burdening my staff and my time with the kind of work that we don't want to be doing. And it really took it took a while for me to get to the point where I felt secure enough to say, listen, when I say yes to a particular type of work, I have to say no to 99 other types of projects out there. And if I don't say no to those 99 other cases, I'm not going to have the expertise. And from a more tangible standpoint, when I'm building a business, I'm going to build my marketing, and I'm going to build a team, and I'm going to build a pipeline. I'm going to build a CRM system and all that stuff for business owners and their planning. And that system's not going to work for business litigation. That system's not going to work for a buy and sale of a business. That system's not going to work for employment law type issues. So rather than trying to build 5 different business models at the same time, I was able to focus on one and divert all my energies into that one particular one. And, you know, not to sound cocky, but I feel like I'm a fairly intelligent person. I should be able to figure it out. What I needed to stop doing was dividing my time across 5 different practice areas, and instead just focus on the one that I wanted to do and the one that I thought would be most profitable.
That's perfect. So this is a common thing, and it's a common thing that a lot of lawyers, those of you that are on the call today, and you're trying to decide how to grow your practice, just to kind of highlight what I heard, Neel, and you can correct me if this is a poor summarization, is that one of the key things to growing is to look at, let's say you've got 4 or 5 different lines of work, but choosing the area of work that's the most lucrative and profitable and you enjoy, and you get behind the lucrative, profitable, and enjoyable work, and really look at how to build and market that particular type of work. Now, the interesting thing, Neel, is that when you did that, and I'm not going to ask you to share price points or dollars or fees on the call. I don't think that's appropriate. But if you could give us, let's say 6-7 years ago when you start the coaching program to today, if you said my average fee per case 6 years ago was X, and compare it to your average fee per case today, what do you think the multiplier is? What do you think the difference is?
It's kind of embarrassing, but I'd say that for our most recurring type of estate plan, it's easily 4, if not 5 times what we charge per plan.
Gotcha. So we actually have increased your average revenue per case by, let's just say, 5 times. Eliminated a lot of the less profitable work. So 2 questions. Are you making more money now than you were 6 years ago?
Yes.
Okay, great. Is it a multiple, or is it just an incremental improvement?
You know, so I'll answer the short question. It's a multiple, but I think there's a qualifier in there, which I think is equally important to the actual financial aspect of it. So those who know me, and I don't know if anybody knows me on this call, but I went through a pretty dramatic shift in my practice. I want to say about 2 years ago, because along the same lines, I was building still the planning practice, but I decided to add multiple different revenue lines and different practice areas until I got to a point within the coaching itself where I decided, okay, this is kind of growing to a place that I don't want to be. And it really took some intestinal fortitude to basically decide, all right, this is not going where I need to be. I need to do something to get it to where I want it to be. So I actually had to take the active decision to cut gross revenue down significantly by spelling off some things that were not really profitable. And it took this training that we worked through together to realize that just because I have cash flow coming in doesn't mean I'm necessarily profitable. And for that reason, you know, yeah, I can charge more per file right now. And I would say over the last 2 years, we've probably gone down a little bit in gross, but I've gone up in profitability, which if I look at it the way, if I were to look back on this, I'd say, look, I'm doing less work for more money now. And so I don't think the gross numbers necessarily tell the whole picture.
Got it. And are we taking more time off or less time off at this point in time?
More time off. I was at a wealth council conference, an estate planning conference and a financial advisors conference 2 weeks ago. That was the entire week. Don't check in. We were in Switzerland with the family earlier. I was out of the office for 2 weeks over the summer for Indian weddings. For anybody who's never been to an Indian wedding, you know that you pretty much need the entire week.
Well, yeah. So how much time do you think you're taking off now versus 6-7 years ago?
I'd say, well, so I don't work weekends anymore. That's something that I kind of drew the line in the sand. I'll make an exception once every 6 months or so if there's somebody who absolutely needs to meet with me. So my weekends are mine. And with a 12-year-old playing travel soccer and a daughter who likes to compete in taekwondo competitions all over the country, I really don't really have a choice in that matter. So, and plus I realize that with my 13-year-old, I only have her for another 4 or 5 years. So I'd rather not spend my weekends doing that. And then we probably average, I'm going to say, about 2 one-week vacations a year, and then we'll try to do a bunch of long weekends throughout the course of the year.
Got it.
So I don't have an exact number for you, but that gives you an idea.
No, that's perfect. Now, I'm going to radically shift the conversation on you. So there's a couple things that you're doing in the practice. So we've already kind of walked through what you've done as far as narrowing your niche. You've gotten rid of different lines of business. You've increased your revenue per case. This is a really cool, what's up on the screen right now for those of you that are following along, is a series of videos. So talk to us about what you're doing with videos and how you've been really aggressive with the use of videos in your marketing and your client, or I should say prospect engagement and prospect education area. So talk to me about this.
Yeah, this has been great. The videos actually serve so many different purposes. I'm a little surprised that more people don't jump on this. And I suspect that a lot of it is just either you're intimidated or you don't know how to get started. But I've used this initially as purely a marketing thing. I wanted to be able to reach as many people as possible. And nowadays, you know, and it's not nowadays, it's been going on for the last, who knows, 3 or 4 or 5 years. These videos are more like infotainment. If you give somebody the option to read a 3-screen article or click on a video for a minute, they're going to click on the video because it's infotainment. Who doesn't want to be entertained? So I was using this as a way to just start getting the word out about what it is that I do. And initially, I really wanted to just and you'll see my videos have gotten better over time. At least I think they have. But the idea was I wanted to disseminate information and build credibility, similar to the book. Ultimately, I got to the point where I realized that that's a good secondary goal. But really more important is I just want people to start getting the feel for who I am. Ideally, they click on these videos and get an idea of who Neel is and hopefully open up to me and want to work with me. But I don't know how many people have clicked on these videos and chosen not to call me because they didn't like my style and maybe I was too old or too young or too bald or too fat or whatever the case may be. And I feel like that's a huge benefit too, because it's actually weeded some people out in the marketing process, whereas otherwise I would have spent an hour in a consultation with them and ultimately they weren't going to work with me anyway. So that's all helpful from a marketing standpoint. From a prospect standpoint, and I would say even from an existing client standpoint, the nice benefit now, and this is where we've been taking these videos to the next level, is using these as a way to educate existing clients. So when I have somebody coming in for a design, and when we're designing their estate plan, a lot of times people would come in kind of cold. I didn't know we were going to talk about who the guardian was going to be. I didn't know we were going to talk about trust. I didn't know we'd talk about who the trustee were going to be. But now if I can send these videos out in advance and pre-educate them, they're coming in and they're hitting the ground running. So something that would have taken 2 meetings and a couple of follow-up phone calls and some emails, now we're actually able to bang it out in that first meeting. So it's actually made us more productive over time because instead of spending 3 hours trying to get information from the client, they watch the video, they know what we're going to discover, they come in and they hit the ground running. And I think that's been powerful. You know, I've seen that happen with folks in our coaching group, with real estate attorneys, for example, who can explain to somebody what's going to happen on the real estate process, or in a divorce proceeding, explain what it's going to be. But I've used it on the estate planning and the business planning space.
Yeah, just real quick, and I know that I'm kind of setting you up here very simple softball, but for a lot of folks, they see these videos and they think, oh my gosh, I need to have a video crew, a complex lighting system, and a really expensive camera. What piece of equipment did you use to do most of these videos?
Well, you're kind of asking me to give up my secret sauce here, but no, it's actually it's my smartphone in selfie mode.
Your smartphone.
And I'm a Samsung guy.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm a Samsung guy, but I'm pretty sure Apple did the same thing, just not as well. but it's it's a smartphone in selfie mode, and I think some years back I decided to actually splurge and get like a $20 tripod that sits on your desktop. But I don't, and I probably should, but I don't even use an external microphone most of the time because I wanted to reduce the amount of time that I took to get this thing going. Like if I waited for the perfect technology and if I waited for the perfect setup and a green screen and this, that, and the other, it just wouldn't get done. So I decided, you know what, I'm just going to start the way I start. And then ultimately, if I want to improve it, I'll improve it. But I don't want to, I don't want any obstacles to my getting this done. So I basically just clicked it on there. And then ultimately I invested in some pretty cheap software, and I'll still keep tweaking, but I don't see myself going crazy with a video studio or anything like that because I like the idea of, you know, if you click on, I don't know if it's on my video library, but it might be on the YouTube channel. I've actually recorded a couple from the car, just laying the phone on the steering wheel and recording it. And I kind of think, you know, I think people are more likely to watch those things because they're more interesting. They're kind of waiting to see if I crash or somebody wrecks into me or something. Maybe.
See if you crash. The PI lawyers are all on the call stressing out as we're talking about this. Yeah. Well, so great. So I want to, you know, I really, one of the things I love about it is that you kind of dare to be ugly. Like you're not taking a risk. You're like going for this. Now, also up on the screen right now, it's one of the things that I think is pretty cool that you've done in your practice. Could you talk about this? Appears to be a classroom. What's this about?
Yep. So a couple of years ago, we moved our office from downstairs to upstairs. We moved into a bigger space, and one of the allures of the space was actually having a classroom in our office. This seats about 25 to 30 people, and we use it to host workshops. In fact, we're hosting one in a couple of days, and then we'll have another one next week. To the community. We've actually been giving it to other folks in the community to use. One of our neighbors is using it as a yoga training station as well. But the reason why we're in there is, and again, this goes back to my personality. I've never considered myself a hard sales kind of salesperson. Like I'm not able to, I shouldn't say I'm not able to, I've not wanted to get people in and have sort of a really hard sale to them to get them to work with me. But I always considered myself more of an educate to motivate person. So we've been using this seminar room or this workshop room to start educating the overall community on things that we do, like business planning or elder law planning or estate planning. And what you're seeing there is next to me is an attorney, Dave Postelski, who's an IP attorney. So we hosted a breakfast, lunch and learn in this particular one, where we talked about patent issues or planning with patents and other intellectual property. And for me, it's fantastic because we can actually have trusts and family LLCs own patents. For David, who's an IP attorney, he's able to tell me about the nuances of doing that sort of planning. And, you know, those of us who are attorneys, we know that we know other attorneys. So the idea was if I could bring in a subject matter expert and make myself a subject matter expert, explain what some of these strategies are and explain high level, and then give them an opportunity to follow up. That kind of marketing suited me well because people had already seen what we do, and hopefully they'll want to work with us after that. And then we do our follow-ups after that. But we've been having a lot of fun with the seminar room. It's been nice to educate the community, and it's been a less in-your-face way of marketing. We're providing value, so hopefully they'll want to continue to work with us.
And this is terrific. So one of the 6 core principles that we teach in programs is that as a rainmaker, you want to be authentically you. You want to be like you, and you don't want to try, you know, there's the old joke, you know, be yourself because everybody else is taken. And you just want to be authentically you. And this is one of the great things that you do. You don't try and be anyone else. You use education both as a customer service and as a marketing. So this is terrific. This is fabulous. So I want to share this because those of you who are looking to grow your practice, part of this is lessons from the Practice Growth Masters. And so far, Neel shared some very interesting lessons: narrowing the practice, raising prices, taking time to do the things you love, writing a book, which is a wonderful way of marketing your practice, doing seminars and education workshops to get out into the marketplace and educate people about your message. What the next thing I have up on the screen.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sure.
I was going to, just before you move on from the marketing aspect, I got to give credit where it's due. I'm very proud of the stuff that I've done, and I'm very happy to have actually implemented this stuff. But I can't take credit for all of it, because every one of those strategies I've built on stuff that my peers have given me. And I mentioned that I've never had a job, and I've never actually worked for another lawyer except for a couple of months over a summer in law school. So it's kind of lonely when you're doing this stuff on your own. And I suspect even if you're a partner, there's still some loneliness, because it's not like you're working for a large corporation where they have a formal training program or a formal marketing department. So my board of directors, my peer group, my sounding board has really been the other guys in my coaching program. And I use guys in the general neutral context, but it's really been the people in there. So I've had people who have started a strategy, or I start a strategy, and we come back next quarter and they've taken it to the next level. And I'm looking at them saying, wow, okay, so you did that with your videos. I'd love to do that. And I think I might have been one of the first ones to do the book, and somebody took it to the next level, and they did that. And then the seminars and the workshops and the invitations, it's like having this entire board of directors. So I don't want to take all the credit for all the marketing strategies. It's come, I wouldn't say 100%, or if not built 100% better, because of the people that I have sitting next to me in those coaching groups, and because of people who share during our show and tells.
Yeah, I think that's one of the benefits, I think, of the group coaching programs, that you're in there with like-minded attorneys that have a collaborative approach. You're typically not going to be a competitor, although in your case, you have a competitor who's 3 miles away from you in the same group. But that's, you both have worked that out, and you're totally cool with it. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the group coaching programs are phenomenal because of the sharing and the contribution and the learning from each other. It makes it very valuable. Spend a minute talking about the Future 50 Awards. What's this that we have up on the screen?
Yeah, so Smart CEO puts out they have an event once a year, and they call it the Smart CEO series. I think I know Smart CEO is a magazine, and they'll recognize their Future 50 Awards. And as honored as I was to have the award, I think it's fantastic. What I really am proud of here is the person who nominated me here is with a accounting firm of Wilkin Gut and Plan. I won't embarrass him by using his name, but he's probably one of the smartest accountants that I know in New Jersey. In fact, probably the smartest people that I know, period. And I really hold him in a high regard. And the fact that he nominated for this award was tremendous, because one of those things, again, and this goes back to me and my my issues, I suppose, but one of my biggest insecurities is, do I have the substantive knowledge to be doing what I'm doing? A lot of times, I don't know if other attorneys on the panel or on the attendees list ever go through this, but I feel like I suffer from a lot of imposter syndrome from time to time. Like, how did I get here? And do I really belong here? And what if people discover that I'm here and realize that I'm not supposed to be here? Here being like a quote unquote accomplished estate planning and business law attorney. And to have somebody that I hold in such high regard nominate me and to receive this award, that was probably one of the most empowering things that I've gone through in a long time. Just to have somebody you respect so much to nominate me for something and see me as the Future 50. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I got out of this.
That's very cool. Congratulations on it. So
Thank you.
as I start to transition through some amazing photos of you and your wife and your family, I'm going to, and we've got you running, it looks like a marathon here. I'm going to ask you the following question. So we have quite a few lawyers that have read, that are listening to your presentation today. And if you're to say, what are the 3 biggest lessons that you've learned as a practice growth master? What are the 3 biggest lessons that you've learned? What would you be open to sharing with them, saying this is lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3?
Well, I think lesson 1 for me has always been, you're a human being first. And again, as zen as this might sound, you only have one life to live. And if I'm going to be, I started my practice when I was 25. And if I'm going to be working for 40 years, I better make sure that I'm enjoying it, because it's not like I get the first 10 years as a mulligan and I get to do it all over again. Yeah, that's it. Once those years are gone, it's gone. So I think that's one, is you better make sure that what you spend 8 to 12 hours a day doing is something that you A, enjoy, or B, is serving some other purpose. But towards that migrate life. That's my biggest takeaway. I'm very much a family person, as you can see from these pictures. And for me, it was making sure that my family is taken care of and making sure that I'm living powerfully. So that was a big thing. The second thing is, I guess I had to get out of my head. I had to get out of my own head, because the answers might be there, but as I look for solutions, if I'm limiting myself to my own world of knowledge, if the only things that I have to get me off of this boat are actually on the boat itself, I'm going to be in trouble. So I needed to find some external sources to realize what was available to me. I don't know if I probably fumbled all over that, the way I articulated it, but I wasn't going to find the answer just by doing the same thing that I was doing over and over again. I really needed to find some way to get some external influences there. Those are probably one and two. Does that make sense?
Yeah, let's hang out with two for a second, because what you don't know about the business of practicing law is what you don't know about the business of practicing law. And this is a very interesting trap that a lot of lawyers fall into, because lawyers are probably the fastest conceptual learners on the planet. They're the upper 2% intellectually, not financially, by the way, but upper 2% intellectually. So when the challenge is, when they hear something, they're like, well, I know that already. And they don't necessarily think about applying that from a business perspective. And they don't necessarily like to take business risks. I think we're a pretty risk-averse profession for a variety of reasons, but we're a pretty risk-averse profession. We never like to put our clients at risk. We never want to put ourselves at risk. We're very, very cautious as a group. So if you don't know what you don't know, and you're very intelligent, you think typically, and it's a trap, you think that you can outthink the problem, but you have no leverage, you have no insight, you have no education, you have no support, no strategy, no coaching, no accountability, quite frankly, nothing that, we've spent 25 years plus developing to help lawyers grow. And you can think all you want about that without any insight or additional education or strategies. It's not going to change anything. So I totally get what you're saying on number two. What you don't know about it, you don't know about it. What's number three for you?
This sounds strangely practical, but this is something that Mark Powers has said early on, and I've probably preached to every attorney I've ever spoken with, is you can never, ever, ever stop marketing. That's probably been one of my biggest takeaways, which sounds, again, oddly specific, but I did not understand the impact of marketing to my life in general. If I don't have a steady stream of prospects coming in, I don't have the luxury to say no to people that I don't want to work with. I don't have the luxury of being able to raise my prices and have a better lifestyle. I don't have the luxury of being able to pay my employees. So you can never, if I thought at some point I'd be able to kick my heels up on my desk and say, hey, I'm good, this thing's going to run on its own, it's not going to happen. So you can never, ever, ever stop filling that pipeline. And you better find a good way to do it. And the way that works for you today is not going to be the way it works for you tomorrow. So you better just develop a skill at getting better at it. So I think
that's great.
I think that's been a big one.
That's great. That's great. I think a lot of lawyers, I think you nailed two big issues. Number one is that if you've got a cash flow or pricing problem, meaning that you're average revenue per case is not where you want it to be. You're not making the money you want. You actually have a marketing problem first and foremost. And to actually increase the gross revenues or net income of your practice, you've got to actually retool time management, retool what a good client versus a bad client looks like, retool your pricing, and you've got to kind of do all those things simultaneously, which sounds really easy when we're talking about, but in actual practice, it takes some work, it really takes some work. So what I'm going to do, if it's okay with you, Neel, I'm going to give an opportunity for people to ask any questions that they have about what you've talked about or what you've presented about, or any questions to me or anybody else on the call with us today. While we're opening that up, and I'm going to ask Mike Wells to pay attention to anyone who perhaps might be raising a hand or saying, hey, I've got a question. There's two ways you can do the question. You can type in the question, or you can literally click, I have a question, and raise your hand, and Mike will unmute you. While Mike's doing that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the group programs, because one of the things that you've talked about is the group programs. And a lot of people on these calls are trying to check us out and figure out, okay, how does this work? How does this play out? And really how we structure our programs are an annual commitment, and people meet 4 times a quarter. And 4 times a year, once a quarter. And typically what we see over that time period is typically a 25% increase in gross, typically a reduction around 15% in the office, usually about a 20% increase in the average fee per file, meaning that your average case per file, kind of like Neel, his went up 5 times. So we usually see in the first year about a 20% increase. Obviously a reduction in stress and interruptions. But more importantly, kind of what Neel's doing, the ability to take more and more time off and really start getting a better control of your life. So from our viewpoint, it's really more control, more thought about what you want, and really starting to build more and more of a competitive advantage. I'm just going to check in for a second, making sure I'm not going to talk over. Mike, I see that Curtis Kaiser has a question. Can you go ahead and unmute Curtis, please?
Sure, Curtis. Yeah, I'm going to unmute you, Curtis. I've got your questions, but go ahead and feel free to ask them aloud.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Curtis.
You.
Hey, Curtis, how are you?
Good. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, sir, we can.
I was wondering what is the sweet spot that you've settled in on right now in terms of your team size as you recalibrate it by limiting your practice areas, keeping your gross steady, trying to increase your net. What team size have you settled in as a nice sweet spot for you?
I don't mind sharing. From an exact number standpoint, we're actually at 7 people right now. But that's the interesting thing about this, without getting into too long of a conversation, is there's been a big emphasis, and this is where Steve's been working with me on this, on building systems and processes. You want to have rock stars as team members, but even rock stars, if you don't give them strong systems and processes, are not going to be able to flourish. So there's certain foundations you want to lay down, and I suspect that either of 2 things is going to happen. I'll either keep the same size team and have fantastic systems and processes, which will lead to more revenue and more income, or the better systems and processes might actually have a reduction in the team size. That's not what I'm really shooting for, though. But right now I have 7 people.
Great. And if there's time for a follow-up question, I was wondering what proportion of your clients do you have on your client protection or maintenance program?
The client protection program, this is our 2nd time trying this right now, and I could tell you that we were not very successful with the first time. But right now, I would say we probably got about, in our new iteration, which we rolled out this year, I'm going to say about 70 people. But we've only rolled it out this year.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure.
Great questions. Great questions. All right. So while Michael, you can interrupt me if you've got anyone else who's got a question.
I do have one other question from Dennis. And
okay,
Dennis,
sure, far away.
What approaches you use, Neel, for direct marketing to find potential clients and to contact them?
To find potential clients, we obviously we're very, very regimented about our blogging. We'll blog 4 times a week. And I have people who help me with that. So that's been great in terms of like our Google search engines. Personally, I made the active decision to add a financial services component to my estate planning practice, which means that I'm not as dependent on advisors for referral sources anymore. But I still do continuing education courses for accountants, our video marketing, obviously. But if I couldn't do anything else and I can only do one thing, I would probably stick to my email marketing. It just allows for some consistent top of mind awareness and a drip campaign, because people just need to be reminded sometimes.
Well, let's be clear about something. When you say your email marketing, your email marketing to existing prospects. This is not cold contact. So before anybody starts freaking out and saying that you can't do that in your jurisdiction. Yeah, so although I know that if we don't set that context up, there's going to be lawyers just wigging out left and right. Oh, you can't do that.
Yeah, you're right.
So talk about that for a second.
Sources. Yeah, we've
so these are.
Go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so for you though, the email marketing, while it sounds simple, it's really a pretty sophisticated top of mind awareness process, where you're requesting referrals and really trying to get business from prospects that are already in your pipeline. So these are one of the things that you do exceptionally well, is that you built up a very nice referral-based practice, both from clients referring work and advisors and other professionals referring work. So when he says email marketing, don't think that you're not email marketing to cold contacts. These are relationships that you've developed. Okay, good. So I just want to make sure that people weren't wigging out. There's lawyers spitting coffee and dropping stuff all over the country right now as they're listening to you talk about this.
That's right.
Okay, I'm going to talk about one thing and then something else, and then Michael will see if we've got any other questions. If not, we'll start to wrap up. If you're interested, we have 2 programs that are starting very similar to the program that Neel's in, called the Practice Growth Program. We have the West Coast program, which is their start date, November 30th and December 1st of 2017. And then we have a new program for 2018 starting in Orlando, which will be February 19th and February 20th. So if you're interested and see if you qualify, and there are some requirements to qualify, so let me talk a little bit about that. First and foremost, you have to be a solo practitioner, a small firm owner. This is not a program for associates. And while we've done work with large firms, you've got to have some ability to control your practice and your direction. I typically would like in this program for you to make a minimum of 100 grand in net income. Now, for most lawyers, that shouldn't be a big deal, but I want to know that you can do that. And I want to know that you have at least 1 employee minimum to qualify for this program. Now, if you're interested in this program, what I'm going to do, Neel, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do 2 things. If you're interested in this program, there's a couple ways you can find out. You can go to the Atticus Advantage website or send an email to us at grow@atticusadvantage.com. But what I'd like to do is recommend to people that if they're interested, today, I think we're going to talk about doing what we call a practice growth diagnostic. And I will talk for a minute about this. And it's really the initial gateway into our world, where you start to think about how you design a practice that works for you. And the practice growth diagnostic is a $295 investment. And what you get for this is a understanding, of your disc, and we call it the focus disc advantage. So you understand, and Neel mentioned a little bit about this earlier, understanding how your disc works is critical to making sure that you swim with the current, not against the current. You understand how you want the world to work. And you work with a diagnostic I mean, you work with one of the coaches or one of our advisors, our customer services team, to kind of get an assessment of where you're at. And what I'm going to do today, just because, and I'm going to have 4 people freak out very quickly, maybe 5. I'm going to say that anyone on this webinar can take advantage of let's just call it the Neel Shah special as a thank you and contribution for Neel taking the time today. Yeah, so if you are on the webinar today and you want to take advantage of this and you sign up for the Practice Growth Diagnostic, I'm also going to include our best-selling book on time management, which we typically sell for about $80. So if you're on the webinar and you want to take advantage of this, you say, I want the Neel Shah special. Now, here's the trick to this. The only way you can get the Neel Shah special, because I just have set up the link. I failed to set up the link for this in advance, and Mike right now is probably throwing up on his computer screen because I'm catching him off guard with this. Sorry, Mike. Is if Larry, Jeff, or Daniel, or Denise call you and they say, do you want the Neel Shah deal or the Neel Shah special? Then you take the call, you schedule the practice diagnostic with them, the practice growth diagnostic, and you get the time management book at no additional charge. You get that included in the package. And I'm doing that just for 2 reasons. Neel has really worked hard at driving his practice into submission over his life goals versus the other way around. A lot of lawyers are victims of their practice, and Neel's one of the few lawyers that really owns his practice and makes it work for him. So if you want to take advantage of that, you're going to do that through one of our people, or if you're like, nah, I don't need the time management book, I've got it, then by all means you can hit the you can directly go to our website. You can do Let's Get Started. And I do have a request. Neel, I think that might be you. Are you turning left?
Yes, I am. I apologize.
I guess fine. So you mute yourself for a second. So if you haven't done so already, add grow@atticusadvantage.com to your contact list so we can send you announcements for free webinars and free programs that we'll have in the future. Mike, while I'm starting to wrap up here, do you have anyone else that have any other questions for Neel or myself?
No other questions have come in.
Okay, great. So you're not mad at me for the Neel Shah special, are you?
I'm never mad. It's a good deal.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. It's a good deal, actually. And
I need to be mad at the Neel Shah special. That's great.
I'm just saying. And I just want to make sure, Dennis, I see one unanswered question on the panel. Is that taken care of?
Yes, I read that question aloud to you earlier.
Okay, great. Just want to make sure, bud. I just saw that question mark. Okay, Neel, any parting thoughts for you before we wrap up today?
No, I mean, like I said, it's I've certainly gotten a lot of value out of this, and you don't know what you don't know. So this is the way to figure it out. Thanks for having me.
Fabulous. Oh no, it's our pleasure. I'm really looking forward to having you on future webinars. You, for a very young man, have accomplished quite a lot. And I think one of the keys to you is how coachable you are. And you're very committed to your family. You're a tremendous father. You're a tremendous husband. You're committed to your employees, and you really work really hard. And it's really cool to be on a webinar with you after seeing all the work that you've done over the past 5 to 6 to 7 years. And I just really want to say thanks. And while the other lawyers on the webinar probably gleaned a lot, I'm sure they're saying thanks to you as well. So thanks, bud. We greatly appreciate that. And with everyone else, thank you. Thank you. And we look forward to having you on the next Atticus Vantage webinar. Thank you, everyone.